Welcome to the Five Thread Podcast. In this episode, we chat to Leigh Burns. Leigh is the founder of Lacuna Sport, the world's first cricket brand developed for and designed by women. Leigh identified the seriousness of the gap in the market from her experiences from a teenage daughter who was excelling at the sport yet not properly kitted out to perform at the level she could. Lacuna Sport was born in 2019, and after more than 3 years of production, testing, refining and enhancing, launched with all the individual pieces of cricketwear that a woman needs to play. Created for women and girls who are serious about cricket, Lacuna's mission is to remove the barriers to movement and ambition so that all sportswomen can walk out onto a pitch feeling confident, comfortable and able to focus on their game, not their kit. Welcome to the Five Thread Podcast. I am very excited today to have Leigh Burns, founder of Lacuna Sports, with me today to talk about what it is like to be a brand owner and founder of a really groundbreaking brand. You know, to me, it's the world's first cricket brand designed by women and for women. Leigh, I wonder if you could start by kind of introducing yourself and your background and what led you to start Lacuna Sport.
Sure. Well, thanks, Joe. It's such an honor to be here. Always good to talk to you and to your listeners. So, as you just said, Lacuna Sports was an idea that came out of the blue. Really, my background is completely unrelated to cricket. You can tell from my accent. I didn't grow up playing cricket. I'm American, but my career up until probably 5 years ago was mainly in healthcare and just in the corporate space. I spent 10 years at a global travel security and medical company doing evacuations and pandemic preparedness planning and infectious disease management. So completely unrelated, but I had decided to leave my corporate world a few years back and was taking a little bit of time off and spending a bit more time with my kids, much to their dismay. And around that time, I guess my daughter, who's now 17, she must have been about 11 or 12. And I think he played a little cricket at school. And I was like, I didn't know girls played cricket. My sons played cricket, but I didn't know anything about girls playing cricket. And she really liked it and asked if she could go to the local club and play. And I took her one day and I saw the girls who were playing were all the girls that she knew. She was a county swimmer at the time, and most of the girls swam with her or they were regional runners. Like, they were real athletes. They were not just people killing time. They were, and I just thought, well, there's got to be something to this female cricket thing, because it looks like if you can get all these girls to show up in droves and the coaches are enjoying coaching them, it just seems like there's something happening here. And sure enough, it became very apparent that girls' cricket was taking off. And I think a little while beyond that, it was about summer of 2019, I think. I was watching her, and she'd gotten quite good quite fast, and she was at an academy session for boys. And she had been brought along and was really excited to be there and got to talk to an ex-England player and was feeling quite pleased and very pumped up to get better. And then they said, Caroline, can you go in and bat? And she said, oh yeah, okay. And they said, well, put your box in. And she's like, what? Why would I need a box? I don't have the bits. And like, all these boys start laughing, and it became this ridiculous situation. And she probably was a bit tougher than I would have been in that situation, just kind of rolled her eyes and got on with it. But it was at that moment that I just thought, wait a second. So we've got a sport that girls are liking. Lots want to show up for it. And we're telling them to put in protective equipment for a penis. You know, like, this doesn't, something is off here. And I called some friends, some Australian friends, thinking, you know, the Australians must have something figured out here. And I just said, you know, what are people doing for women's cricket? Like, it's a big deal in Australia, it's a big deal other places. You know, is there equipment for that? Is there a kit for that? What do they wear? What do they do? And they said, well, they wear cricket clothes. I'm like, well, cricket clothes look good on Stuart Broad. They don't look good on a girl. They, you know, so I started asking around, and it became pretty clear no one was doing anything. And on the protective gear, I actually called one of the old doctors I worked with who'd been in the British military as a doctor and said, is there any reason a girl should be wearing a box to play cricket? And she's like, yeah, a man didn't think otherwise. Like, no, there's no physical reason a woman should wear a box. It's a bone. So at that moment, I kind of thought, there's an opportunity here, but also I'm watching my daughter love this game and she doesn't feel welcome. I mean, she's liking it anyway, but how many girls would like to give it a go and are being told to put in male protective equipment and told to put on boys' clothes and see-through trousers and all of these other things, and they're still going to be brave enough to show up every week? And so at that point, I just said, I'm going to do something about it. And so we had this little funny thing called a pandemic that kicked off not long after. That certainly slowed everything down. But the good thing about it slowing down is it gave me a lot of time to really think about what it meant to set up a clothing brand, knowing absolutely nothing about sportswear or clothing in general. And it also meant that everyone's world had slowed down to where anyone would take my call. I had so many athletes and people around the game of cricket willing to take my call, walk me through requirements, needs, considerations. I read the bylaws of cricket and I took, so it gave me a lot of time to educate myself, learn more about fabrics. And I also took a course on sustainability in sports because at that time it was very clear that cricket was a sport very affected by climate change. And I felt really uncomfortable putting more clothing out into the world, particularly for a sport where my clothing could be part of the problem. And so because I had the time, I was able to take a fundamentals course through Basis. And Joe, that's how we met. But it gave me, again, the time to really get my ducks in a row and decide what it was I wanted to do and how to do it, as well as just being in full listening mode with what would be my future clientele to really see what the gaps were and what frustrated them. And it was just absolutely eye-opening.
I mean, I think there's so much there to unpack. One of the first things you said was almost this idea of being an outsider. You're an outsider to the game of cricket, but also to starting a brand. And I just wonder, have you found that a help or a hindrance? And I'm just interested, because I've spoken to quite a lot of people who come from outside of sport and they bring new perspectives on things. Have you had any challenges in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was my worst enemy on that, in that I decided it was going to be a problem. I worried, I'm an American who's lived in the UK 19 years. I've worked in British businesses. I've worked with British clients. I know there are certain areas where if I rock up with my accent, it's not always welcome. And it felt like coming in and questioning a sport with the history that it has in a country steeped in that, with a funny accent and being female, seemed like it would be a bridge too far. And I actually talked to a few journalists about it and just said, what do you think? I kind of feel like I should hide behind the brand a bit, and they said, absolutely not. You are part of the story because sometimes it takes another perspective. So I think once I got over my fear that I would be off-putting, it was more about, well, how can I leverage being an outsider? And I think, let's be honest, women in sport in a lot of cases are outsiders, certainly in traditional sport, and not even necessarily because someone's decided that. It just is. Cricket just wasn't played by women for a long time. So a lot of these questions hadn't been asked. And because I don't know what the sacred cows are, or I haven't grown up with cricket a certain way, I can ask questions. And sometimes they're stupid and sometimes they're not. But I think the thing that's worked to my benefit is because I don't know anything historically, I'm not coming in telling people what the answers are. I'm going to people and asking them quite genuinely, what do you think? What do you need? What works today? And I don't have a lot of the scar tissue. I think if you talk to some of the women who've played in this game or any sport where they have been kind of facing outsider status, there is scar tissue there. There's people who have been treated badly, who've had things happen, who have really built up a lot of baggage from that. And I think Lacuna needs to be above that. It needs to be separate from that. I think what I found to be our superpower is this outsider status, that I can come in and ask a question without it being personal to me. Yes, it's personal, and that my daughter played, but she had a good run in cricket. But I'm not trying to solve something that's affected me deeply. I'm just coming in saying, I'm your resource to help solve a problem for you. And so I think that has actually been beneficial in the end.
Also, I wanted to talk to you about the design process, in terms of how you've approached that, because traditionally it has been either a unisex garment or a garment that is designed for boys or men that women just have had to wear. So how have you approached that from a girls and women's point of view from the start?
Yeah, I mean, I think as an outsider also to clothing, these are the kinds of things that might make more sense to you. But the fact that something is called unisex is such a joke. Like that's not a thing, right? So um, what I saw lazily done and still see is traditional brands saying, "Uh-oh, I think we're supposed to appeal to a wider base. Let's change the labels and call it unisex." And basically what that means is it's boys kit that's been relabeled, or it's something that they say, that'll do. There is no unisex. It's a marketing tool. So for me, my first research was, again, trying to buy clothes for Caroline. I have purchased every female article on the cricket stage, and I can tell you there isn't a single one that was considered for her shape, for her body, or for her game. It was all, as Sue Strachan always likes to say, female kit has been done for us, but not with us. So if somebody has a quote female cricket top, it's usually just a men's that they just had the factory cut a bit more narrow, or they said, "Oh, do you have a pattern for women's gear?" And they ask their factory in China or whatever. Nobody's actually said, "Well, let's think about the female game of cricket." So, okay, what are the problems that the cricketers have? If they're bowling, they raise their arm, their shirt comes up, or if they're moving through their action, it comes up in the back and they have to tug their shirt down. Or if they put pads in, the thighs aren't wide enough, or there's different body types in cricket. No, I now can say after this many years, nobody's doing that. Nobody thought about it. Nobody cared. I think the market is not that big yet. There's a lot of women playing cricket, a lot of girls playing cricket. But I can tell you from doing this now for several years, this stuff does not fly off the shelves. The market is still very, very new. And so I think for the big brands to say, we need to design it well, we need to make really small quantities, which their factories wouldn't be willing to do. And it needs to be completely different from the men's stuff. I just think it's in the too hard bucket and nobody's bothered. And so I just said, well, if I'm going to bother, I'm going to do it right. And so instead of taking a garment and retrofitting it, we started with a sheet of paper. I had a really brilliant designer who had trained as a female sportswear designer. And she and I just sat down and talked to people, and we drew sketches, and we said, "Oh, you want zippers on the trousers? Okay. What does that pocket look like? Where does it go? What do you not want for it to have? What are you going to put in it? Things like that." And just really started with a very informed design process.
And I think that can be quite unusual for a lot of people to actually co-create with athletes and with different stakeholders. Like you say, often we're designing for people rather than with people. But how did you find going from that idea phase and kind of having that sketch on paper to actually a finished product, in terms of working with that supply chain and, the smaller quantities that you talked about?
Everyone told me from the very beginning, this will take much longer than you think it will. I'm like, yeah. So I kind of added in 3 months or whatever and figured, but it'll be all right. It took years. It took literally years to get from concept to finished product. And even then, I didn't do it necessarily right the first time. I've learned a lot along the way. But the hardest thing as a small brand is, particularly I think during COVID, and there are a lot of people who started small brands, and I made a commitment early on that I would make everything in Europe. I tried to make it in the UK, and I genuinely couldn't. I found a factory. I found all sorts of people who I tried, and I mean, I could have I would have actually lost money per garment. It's just so expensive to produce in this country, and it's heartbreaking because I really wanted a British product. But once it couldn't be British, I tried to make it European. And so going to the smaller, really high quality, sustainable factories in Europe, there are a lot, but they're used to startups calling. And how many of those startups don't pay their bills or don't turn into anything? So in order for someone to go through the development phase with us and get from concept to sample and beyond, we had a lot of fails. We had a lot of people not call us back. A lot of people send us stuff that was really terrible. And then once we got through that first phase to get to production, even then there were so many lessons learned that I just didn't know about testing fabrics. There's so much I just learned as an entrepreneur that it was all part of the process. But I would say it's only now that I feel 100% confident in my patterns and everything, that it is how I wanted it to be. And that's been first drawings 2019.
And I know you as somebody who doesn't like to compromise, and I say that in terms of things like your materials. You know, you use some of the best materials that I've seen on the market. You're unwilling to sacrifice on things like quality for that price. You know, have you found that balance of making this commercial and also not compromising on those values that you believe in, like quality and like fit?
It's a really good question, and it was something that I've spent a lot of time on from the very beginning, which was I'm going to make the product that I believe the market needs. Of course, I would never compromise on fit. When it came to fabric and sustainability or circularity, that was another thing that was just a hard line for me. And I think there's a few answers to that. The first is back to my point about clothing made for us, but not with us. I was an athlete growing up. I'm now, a middle-aged woman whose body looks very different than it used to. And what I would reflect on is there are sports that I no longer play because what I would have to wear for those sports, I'm no longer comfortable in. And I started thinking about, for me, my favorite gym kit, my favorite, any kind of ski jacket, whatever it may be. Why is it my favorite? And it's usually, it looks nice. It looks nice on me. I feel really good in it. It's going to last. It gives me confidence that I'm wearing something that I feel my best in. And I think that's very different. I'm not going to stereotype and say no men care about that, because they do. And I've interviewed a lot of men who do. But if you're going into a sport, you need your confidence. You're going into battle. You need to be able to focus, as we always say, focus on your game, not your kit. Women have spent years being distracted by how they look in things. I've talked to professional athletes who were competing in World Cups or Olympics and saying, I see a picture of myself and I looked fat, or I didn't look my best, or they took a really bad angle. And that's ridiculous. We should be better than that to put athletes through that. And so I think the first thing was, I don't know anything about this industry anyway, so I'm not going to listen. I'm just going to go do what I think needs to be done. So I think fabrics can drape well. They can look good on a human form. Cricket has all shapes and sizes and religions and different things. So I thought, I'm not drawing this for a netballer. I'm drawing this for someone there's a big diversity of shapes and sizes. So therefore the drape and how the fabric hangs on you really matters. The textures, I'm a big texture person, being able to touch something and love it. And I knew that I would need to build brand loyalty, that they needed to feel connected to Lacuna as a brand and not just, oh, it's a top, because people start copying me. I'm not a fool. If it works, they'll copy it. So how do I build that loyalty? I think about the end user. When we talk about not compromising on the other bits, I figured I was the dumbest I was ever going to be when I started this. So if I figured that was the high water mark on cost and leverage and negotiating power, that if my margins were really thin, but I was making a product I was proud of, that I could live with that. As long as I wasn't underwater per garment, which I'm close on some, at least I knew my product was right and people would start to believe in Lacuna. And then I could get better. So, for example, I'm doing some shorts and some leggings now, and I just found an EcoNile fabric, and I could get it a little cheaper direct from the source versus using my manufacturer. So, like, those are the things where maybe it shaves a couple pence per meter, but before I just kind of took whatever was handed to me. So I just figured I was never going to be in a situation where I'd cut a corner and then later would want to go back and square that corner, and my margins would be all out of whack, or my cost structure, so that I would just do the right thing from the very beginning, and that I'd get better at it. Basically, is that's the gamble I've taken.
And I think it's a good gamble, that's going to pay off, Leigh. But I also think it takes a lot of courage and confidence to do that, to be bold and to not compromise. And I wonder, kind of through this process, what are those kind of key skills that you have had to rely on? What's been really important in terms of leading this brand and growing this brand? Has it been that kind of unwavering confidence? Have you kind of taken the skills that you built in corporate to build Lacuna? And has there been certain things where you thought, I just wish I'd been a bit braver, or I wish I'd done this a different way?
I mean, I think women in particular, but I think probably any high achievers in the corporate world have imposter syndrome. That's usually, there's something that drives you, and it's not always unwavering confidence. A lot of it is a lack of unwavering confidence and driving yourself to be better. And that's certainly in the corporate world a proven thing. I think I probably hurt myself in the first few years by lacking the self-belief, and that I could be like, what do I know? What do I know about cricket? What do I know about clothing? What do I know about, these people aren't going to want to talk to me. And I wasted a lot of time and energy on that, because I have a dear friend who started working with me a year or two into Lacuna. Who's a friend from the cricket pitch, who comes from fashion. And I remember her saying, Leigh, we are now officially the world experts on female cricket kit. I'm like, oh, Katie, we're not the world experts on anything. She's like, Leigh, we're literally the only people doing it. We have spent not just hours, but years thinking about this. And I can guarantee you that's more than anybody collectively has done. And, trying to kind of change your mindset into being in a position of, actually, I do know what I'm talking about. That took me a few years. And I'd say I still was probably trying to play the role. I love a big team. I love working in a big, complex global organization. The messier, the better. The bigger the teams, the change, the structure. I love that. I thrive in that. And so me sitting at my computer, and particularly through COVID on Zoom, I didn't have a source to get my energy. And I learn with other people really well, and I love working with other people. And so I think I was trying to play the role of what I thought I was supposed to be. And I'd say it's probably been until about a year or so ago, probably just a year, where I just said, I've run massive businesses. Like, my skills are, this is a product. And a lot of what I did in my corporate world is I was the commercial head or the operations head or the whatever, working with experts. So I worked with doctors, or I worked with security professionals, or I worked with public health people, or whatever. And I thought, this is no different. The professionals in this situation are cricketers, or they're sustainability experts, or they're fabric experts. And if one of my strengths has always been leveraging experts, respecting them, being able to take what they say and turn it into something real and do it quickly and do it effectively, that is a skill. That is my strength. That's what I've always been good at. That's why I got jobs. That's why I was successful, is for that. And so I think once I had the mindset change of, actually, these are skills I have. And I think also, I'm not afraid to pick up phone calls. I'm not afraid of boardrooms. I'm not afraid of speaking. I'm not afraid of negotiating contracts. I'm not afraid of working in other countries. So I think that is an advantage for me because I've always done that. So it doesn't, none of that feels scary or working with numbers or whatever. So I think that served me well. It was almost getting over the hump of imposter syndrome of, oh my God, I'm not an entrepreneur and I don't know anything about clothing. Once I put that behind me, I think the business has gone from strength to strength.
Definitely. And it's ironic, though, that you put entrepreneur on your LinkedIn profile.
It was hard. It was hard. When I wrote it, I was like, oh, I sound like such a loser.
To me, Leigh, you've always been such a role model in terms of A, how you've handled yourself through this, but B, in how you've built this business with such integrity. And that integrity really kind of spanned different touch points in terms of that co-creation with, athletes and stakeholders, that you didn't put these preconceived ideas on others, you asked. But also, like I say, the due diligence in the supply chain. But another thing that I've always really respected the brand for is that view on sustainability, and you said you did that course with Basis. And I see, when I look at your product, lots of little changes that you put within the product to make it more sustainable. And yes, there's the materials, but I know there's things like you have extra long hems so that you can turn them up and pass them along. I wonder if you can kind of share a bit more about how you've gone on that sustainability journey, easy wins, challenges, and maybe some things that potentially customers or players might not know, kind of the hidden sustainability things that you've factored into that product.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think, Joe, you're always very good to challenge me, and that there's some of this stuff that I just take for not granted, but like because we've always done it, I forget that it's special. But I think when I looked at being sustainable, I remember sitting, actually might have been if it was at the Basis conference where I met you, Joe, where sitting in a room, I think it was someone from Surrey or one of the counties, and talking about, well, we need to sublimate kit because new entrants to the sport like the colors. And just this whole idea that my original goal was to never sublimate anything, that I wanted to produce everything perfectly and it would be handed down for generations. And we didn't need to do all the silly printing of polyester. And I realized in about 5 minutes that wasn't where cricket was. And so, that's a little microcosm of some of the bigger issues I face on sustainability. And so what we actually created for ourselves was I would almost like to say it's like it's our decision criteria that we always follow when we're looking to make something. And I think it's served us as our guiding principles, and it's made things a lot easier so that I'm not hemming and hawing about, oh my gosh, I can't find anything that's recycled right now. Oh gosh, we can't compromise on this. And then saying, wait a second, it's high quality, it's going to last. We can treat it with antibacterial so it's not going to smell. We can make it fit so people love it. And it's made in Europe, and the yarn is woven in, so therefore we are already 80 miles ahead of everyone else. We may not be where we want to be, but we're further along than we could have been. So I'd say when we made decisions, and when we do make decisions, the first thing we say is, do women need it to play cricket? So if they don't, I don't need to be Nike. I don't need to be Lululemon. They can go to Nike. They can go to Lululemon. They can go to Gymshark. So I'm not here to just put leisure wear out. Has someone already made it well? So, for example, one of the early things that I really wanted to do was like a cricket boot, cricket spike. And then I thought, you know what, shoes are really hard. And that's a technology that I don't know anything about. There's other companies doing it. I'm not going to get in the shoe business. Bags as well. I wanted to do a good cricket bag that wasn't just a cavern, because women like pockets. And I was like, well, if someone's going to do that, if I can't do it sustainably, if someone's going to do it better, I'll leave that. So has somebody else made it? If not, can we make it affordably in Europe? And so that is where bags are a perfect example. I really tried. I called, maybe from this podcast, I'll get some contacts. I tried to find sustainable fabric that I could make a cricket bag from that wouldn't cost £500, because no one will buy a 500-pound cricket bag. And the answer was I couldn't. So I didn't. So if I can't make it affordably in Europe, I'm not going to make it. And then there was on some items, so for example, a ponytail cap. I really wanted a hat that could accommodate a ponytail, because when you're trying to bowl and you're having to take your hat off and give it to the match official, and then you've got to fix your hair and do it all up again. I just would watch women on TV and I think, gosh, that's annoying. And so I started looking at designing a ponytail cap and having to do it myself, because there's nothing in Europe that was any good. And then I thought, gosh, all that R&D. I found a brand in the US that was female led, and they'd made the perfect hat. And it was a patented design. They'd spent all of the time and money on the things that I would have done, like the best fabric and, Velcro that doesn't stick in your hair. And they happened to make the hats in China. And I thought, well, you know what? They might make them in China, but they are absolutely made for purpose. They are designed with integrity and they fit a need, and people are going to love them. And so in that case, I said, you know what? One, I'm going to partner with someone doing it better. Two, if they don't make them in Europe, if it serves a need and someone's going to love that hat, it's absolutely worth it versus not having it on the market. So, that's a little bit on other things where someone's made it well. Again, I've just given that example of pony flow for hats. We've looked at tie bands for hair ties, Next Cricket for bats and pads and gloves for women, Booby Doo for sports bras. And so we're happy to partner, and they're not even commercial arrangements in most cases. They're just literally like-minded people who we love their product. And then if we were going to make it ourselves in Europe, was it a certified regulated factory? That's why we went to Europe, is because they are. I don't have time to audit or the expertise. Do they have durable performance fabrics? Is it going to look good and feel good on a player and not be transparent, not be gross? Will they give me reasonable MOQs to reduce waste? Because people just aren't going to buy loads and loads of this stuff. And then if we can get sustainable fabric or recycled materials, even better. And then that's when we decide to proceed. So that's a little bit of a convoluted walk through our decision criteria. But I think that that's what served us well, is instead of getting tied up in knots, it's if we can make it to serve the purpose of a female cricketer and they desperately need it, if we are trying our absolute best, and we're always looking at ways to improve. So we've always printed in our collection, we always have printed the care labels and stuff onto the garment so that we didn't have extra fabric for tags. Of course, if you're selling in Europe, you have to have those tags, hopefully not much longer. But on our teamwear manufacturers were still printing labels, and we didn't want them. So we've just, again, moved to being back of neck, and we've just changed all the artwork in our teamwear so we can get rid of those labels. So we're always trying little things, but we're also really transparent on that. There's a few things that we tried to do that we said, oh, this will be great for circularity. And we're like, you know what? Actually, that didn't work. So our main thing is just, we're going to be very honest. Our period pants, we tried to make them in Europe for 3 years. We couldn't get a supplier to do them well and make them affordable. And affordability of a product like that was really critical to me, that we could be able to provide it at a reasonable price, and that we also could use it as working with charities and other things. And so we do make those in China, but it's a really, really, really high quality, great product that's going to serve women well. And it was worth the compromise there. So again, a bit of waffling, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an indication of some of the ways we think about things. And it's always front of mind.
I think that's a really good overview, and I have tried quite a few of your products. The hat I just thought was outstanding, as were the hair ties, and I loved it because it was almost very performance curated. They were the best that I've tried, and
Yes.
I really value that somebody has taken the time to do that for me, and so I can just trust you and buy that best product. Also, like with your period pants, you are the only ones that actually took the absorbent panel all the way up the back. I haven't seen any competitors kind of do that. And I thought that was quite unique. And obviously there'll be a price upcharge for doing that. But what I liked is actually you thought about how those needed to perform, and you did it. You made the best product. And also with your hoodie, it's one of those things where you said before, what makes something your favorite product? Actually, when you put it on and you feel great in it. And that's what I found when I've tried the Lacuna Sport product, is that you just feel great in it. And I think there's a certain type of magic for that. And it comes from that sweating of the product, that really kind of consideration of how do we make this the best it can be. And, I just wonder what reaction you've had to Lacuna Sport from both professional cricketers, but also from amateur players as well, because I know you're doing a lot of team wear. What kind of feedback have you had?
So I think you often learn the best lessons when you make a mistake. One of my earliest meetings with a team, it was a team out in Surrey, and I remember driving in the middle of the night and I had no idea where I was, and going out to do a fitting of hoodies. And when we designed for Lacuna, and the idea in my head, my muse was my daughter and girls her age who were on kind of county performance pathways. And so this team, I had kind of I didn't even clock this huge uptick in women's cricket at like kind of grassroots softball, where you'll have mums of kids who are like, what's this cricket thing? I might as well play too. And women of all ages picking up the sport. So I'll be honest, I didn't even really know that existed, because I was starting from where I started. And I went out to this club in Surrey in the middle of the night, and I had my hoodie, and it's not the hoodie you have, it's our technical hoodie, and it's made to be able to do like winter nets in it, because it doesn't have draw cords that flop up in your face, and it has a dipped hem. So while you're bowling, you're not pulling down your top, and it's got long sleeves, and it's shaped so your arms don't get in the fabric when you're bowling. So I took those out, and we could do them in team wear fabric. So I brought out my samples, and probably the average size of the women there was about a 16. And my hoodies just didn't really accommodate beyond that. And I scrambled and came back with another solution really quickly, but I'd lost the sale. And what I realized in that was I was applying the wrong standards to cricket. I was thinking of who I thought should play cricket or did play cricket. And that's what's wrong with women's sport. And from then on, I just kind of made this vow: if someone wants to step onto a pitch, they should feel great. And so we moved our size range that was I'd say it was about a UK 8 to maybe 14, 16. We now go 6 to 22, particularly for our team wear, so that every single woman, we're not doing little kids, but any kind of teenager up through the grave, if they want to be playing cricket, we're going to give them something that's going to be made for their body. And I'd say probably the counter of that story, and back to your question of what the feedback we've gotten, if I start with just grassroots, the softball crowd, I just fitted a team recently, and I took their tops to them. And there was a woman, when we first were doing the fitting, I had my samples, and they would go in the changing room and come out with their friends and say, what do you think of this size, whatever. And this other woman goes, well, I'm not going to try it on. I look bad and everything, and I don't try clothes on. So just get me whatever's the biggest. And when I went back to deliver the kit, she was there, and she went back because I'd ordered her 2 sizes. I was like, look, I'm trying out these sizes. You take which one works for you. I'll pay for the other one. Don't worry about it. I need to know if this is going to fit you. And so she came back and she handed me one size, and she was actually wearing her top. And she's like, I feel great in this. This makes me feel really happy. I feel really good. And she even let me take her picture. And, the fact that women who maybe haven't felt catered for, who are brave enough to still show up every week and play a sport, the fact that they can say, I now feel good in this, that matters to me. So, that would be a good example. The other side is, it drives me mad watching Muslim girls having to wear skins in boiling heat because they've not been given clothes that fit, and they have to add all these extra layers. there was a girl who was at a tournament that we had supplied kit for, and she was wearing a hijab, and she was wearing all these extra layers. And I said, would you mind just trying my clothes and just seeing if they would work for you? And she wrote back and she's like, finally, a pair of trousers that I feel I don't have to wear, like 3 sizes too big. They fit me without being tight. I feel comfortable and I'm not going to be so hot. Those are the kinds of stories. I mean, the flip side, on the professional side, I've just recently, I was working, it's a long story, but Maya Bouchier wound up with some of my, one product that was a must for me is girls from county level on up and hardball need to wear their thigh pads under their trousers. And men just will drop their trousers on the side of a cricket pitch. They don't really care, and they'll put their pads in. Girls are almost never given a pavilion or a changing room. And I can't tell you how many times I've watched my daughter and her friends like go behind a tree or have to stand in front of each other to try to put pads down their trousers, or they're wearing like Nike bike shorts or something. And so an early thing for me was to get compression shorts that were white so they could go under whites, or they could go under colors that didn't ride up, that were comfortable on your midsection so that if you're bending over, they're not uncomfortable, etc. And so I had sent Maya Bouchier a pair of these, and she was off to India with England, and she wrote to me and she's like, these are the best shorts I've ever had. They're the only ones that I didn't feel disgusting and sweaty and horrible. And in India, can I have some more? And so I've been noticing all of her pictures from New Zealand. Every time she's gone biking or anything else, she's wearing my shorts. And, that gave me a lot of confidence. I have to say, I was worried about moving from grassroots to pro because I thought, what if I've missed something? And I'm just now, watch this space, but I'm working on a professional contract now. And so I have the confidence that I know this product is going to stand up to the rigors of the professional game. And the thing that's been so exciting with that is I had someone tell me, again, and if you listen to what people say, you'd never do anything, who said, you can't offer all those different styles to a professional team because it's too hard to fulfill. It's too confusing. You just need to offer one top, one trouser. And I have to say, from taking orders, it's completely validated why I have different styles for different body types, because there is not one product that is the majority order. Across 4 tops and 2 trousers, I have exactly even across every product, which means that the women were able to pick the item that was best for their bodies. And it just shows you what sport hasn't done previously. So I can't wait to see them in this and be like, oh my gosh, wait, I didn't have to order a men's. I had to tell some of them, please don't order men's. I promise you it's going to fit you, because they're so used to having to wear it. But, that's been really exciting, is to see these people at all these different levels just say, finally, something that I feel good in.
And to me, this is why what you are doing is so important and why it's so groundbreaking, because a lot of people might just look at this and just say, well, it's just kit, it's just clothes, it's really not that important. But for really until now, women have had to make those compromises. They've had to play in garments that they don't feel good in, that don't perform for them. And you're breaking down those barriers now. And I think that is game changing. It gives women self-confidence, but it also legitimizes the fact that they are in the game, that somebody's actually thinking about them. And I think that's so importantly.
That's what I think it is. Yeah.
And I'm just going to round up now, but there's 2 things I just want to mention. I know that you do a lot of work on education. You're very giving of your knowledge and experience. And I think on your website, you have a resources section where people can learn more. How can people find out more about Lacuna, more about what is happening in women's cricket?
There are a few good places. I mean, I think there's one thing that all of us who are in this little world are really clear on. I just had this conversation with someone the other day about this, which is we feel we're part of something great. We feel we're part of a change, and we really want to keep the positive energy around that change. And as people, I think it was Alex Scott who said, We'll remember who was here when everyone jumps on the bandwagon. We'll remember who did it when it wasn't cool. I think you do start to see some people trying to say, oh, I can do that. I can do women's cricket or whatever. I think the women who've been in the trenches, people like Lydia Greenway, who's been in this trench literally since she played, unsung heroes, people who are fighting for this without making a noise. We really want to just support women in the game. You don't need to take down cricket. There's nothing negative about this. This isn't men are bad. There's nothing negative in this. This is just, it's a great game. As someone who immigrated to this country, there's nothing better than going out on a summer's evening to a cricket pitch. I don't care who you are, and just sitting out with family and friends and, a long evening. That is part of what everyone should have access to. And it's a positive thing. And it doesn't mean that you're taking on the establishment. It can mean, as they love to say, cricket is a game for everyone. So what we try to do is be involved in this kind of positive messaging and education. So what we saw from going around the country to a lot of counties is there's not a lot of collective information on how do I set up a girl's side. We'd hear questions about safeguarding, or how do I know how to buy a bat? Does my daughter need a wear box? Do I need, where do I get resources on this? How do I find out about period awareness? How do I educate, how do I teach my coaches how to coach girls? So it's something that we talked to Lydia Greenway about. We work really closely with Lydia, who's one of the most generous, lovely people on the planet. And she's got a site called Cricket for Girls, which is a hub for teaching. It's kind of a train the trainer. She does a lot with schools and clubs and coaches to coach the coaches to teach girls. But it's got a huge following from schools and people around the country. And so we said, Lydia, would you mind? Why don't we want to do this resource hub where everything we learn when we go around the country, and someone says, like Yorkshire, when Kendall had found that great program that you worked on upcycling. Like, upcycling is really big for us, obviously, from a circular brand. If somebody's figured out how to upcycle in Yorkshire, there's no facility in cricket where they all share their ideas, which makes no sense to me, but it doesn't happen. The counties don't all get together and share ideas. So it's like, if they're worried about a roof or this or that, if we are hearing it because we're driving around the country, what if we were to provide all that information and link it back so that people can say, oh, here's what Yorkshire did. That's cool. I was looking for that. So we created this resource hub. I didn't want to put it on Lacuna because I didn't want it to feel commercial, because it's not commercial. It's a labor of love. So through Cricket for Girls, we have a free resource hub. So if you just go to Cricket for Girls and go through to the resource hub, and basically anything we've learned or someone's asked about, if someone said, oh, can you confirm for me the rules on this? We'll actually put the rules. And then some of the doctors at the ECB gave us early access to some of their findings on, like, pregnancy or around women's health in cricket or whatever. And so anything that we find that someone else is doing really well, we will put it there and reference who it was, or if there's an organization doing it. And then everyone just can share their best ideas and can learn, because everyone's trying to do the same thing around the country. And if we can just make it a bit easier and not recreate the wheel all the time, we feel that we're part of the fabric of female cricket, and we just want to make it thrive.
What an amazing resource. We'll definitely put the link in the show notes to that. What is next for Lacuna in the next 12 months? I know there's certain things that you can share with us and certain things that are in the pipeline. Are there some times in the year that we should kind of watch this space to see what's happening?
Yeah, I'd say we've got a big announcement in the next week or two around some activities we're doing. And then we have a product that we'll be kind of piloting through that we've worked on for the last year with a focus group. It's really close to my heart and something we always wanted to do. So we'll have an important product launch. And I mean, it's amazing to think what we could do over the next 12 months. I mean, we see teamwear orders coming in daily. A lot of what our focus has been is just getting we felt that we were really taking off, and we wanted to make sure. We heard so many stories of clubs who ordered teamwear kit that never showed up. we just wanted to make sure that our supply chains were really, really robust, that if we were to have explosive growth, we could handle it. So a lot of it's been really putting down. Our developers, a really professional woman who's put everything in place and gotten all of our patterns really locked tight. So I'd say we've done a lot of professionalization over the last 12 months, and the next 12 months hopefully is just growing on that platform and taking off. So we'll watch this space.
And just as we kind of come to a close now, is there anything that you want to add or anything that we haven't covered?
I would just say one thing that you asked about that I probably didn't answer very well is being a founder and trying to run a small business that is, aiming for circularity and trying to make responsible choices. It is really hard, and it is ungodly expensive. And it is no surprise that people cut corners, because it is so hard to do this well. Post-Brexit, with all of the duties that are put on, it is really hard to make a high-quality garment. And I'm not seeing the consumer willing to pay for that yet. They say they do in every survey, but they don't. And, people will say, oh, I only buy sustainable, and then they, walk into Primark and buy something. So it's really hard to do this well. And I don't think there's enough collective resources. It would be great to be able to work together and buy fabrics together, or have some kind of collective purchasing power, or things like that. I mean, it's hard to learn, and it's hard to do, and it's terrifying, and it's expensive. But it's rewarding, and every time I go and talk to a club, it fuels me to do it again.
Amazing. And I think that is because you do it well, and you do it driven by a passion and purpose that something needs to change. We can make cheap product that isn't fit for purpose, but I feel like the DNA of the brand is to really empower female players and to give them a space and to give them kit that makes them feel good and they perform so well in. And I think that's testament to you, Leigh, the fact that you have been so bold and uncompromising in that vision of what you want Lacuna Sports to be. So thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it. I know you are super busy, so thank you. And we look forward to speaking to you again.
Well, thank you for having me, Jo. Always a pleasure. And I hope this was helpful. And we'll talk soon. Thank you.